Good day, everyone. The main topic of our group will be the practice of civil engineering. As future civil engineers, it is very important that we must know what are the different practices and be familiar with what our profession all about, which is focused on designing and executing structural works, such as dams, bridges, highways, sewage systems, power plants, and other structures that may serve and help the public. In general, this manual addresses the procurement in civil engineering services for a quality project. Quality, by definition, is one satisfactorily meeting both the expectations of the client or employer and the requirements of the project. It requires professional dedication, effort, adequate time for investigation, planning and innovation, fair compensation, and appropriate authority and responsibility. This cannot be achieved only by the effort at the beginning or end of a project. These efforts must be conscious, continuous, and consistent throughout all phases of a project. So in civil engineering, there are five phases that are properly observed. First is the planning or preliminary engineering. This is the stage at which the options are considered and the pros and cons are evaluated. Most engineering projects involves the creation of a new product or destruction and rebuild of an existing one, and the project is defined on that basis. Number two is detailed design. Once the exact product is chosen, detailed design can begin. The end result is usually a set of drawings and or a tender package. At this stage, all of the issues are investigated and a complete engineering analysis is performed. Number three is tendering. This phase includes advertising, answering of bidder questions, holding pre-tender meetings, and opening of the tenders. Number four is construction or implementation. This phase involves the physical implementation of the work that the engineer has designed. The engineer's representative is usually on site because of the engineer's responsibility to ensure adequate construction of the work, particularly for items that become concealed like concrete reinforcement. Also, since the engineer is more concerned with the suitability of the final product from an engineering standpoint, there are usually constructability issues that require addressing. Number five is post-construction. Once the product is completed, the final documentation phase is required to ensure that the stakeholders have the documentation they need and project funding and administration issues are finalized. Quality results from team effort and is measured by the degree of satisfaction of all parties involved. This manual is dedicated to advancing both the understanding and quality of the project of civil engineering. The development of this manual is predicated on the basis that civil engineering services are accomplished in a manner meeting the standard of care of the profession of civil engineering. And that would be all for the introduction of the practice of civil engineering.
Topic 1.2 is the professional responsibility. But before we proceed to that, let us first know what is the meaning of a professional. A professional is a person who is paid to undertake a specialized task. The standard of practice is for civil engineers to be given responsibility for studying, conceiving, designing, observing, construction, and assisting in the programming for operating and maintaining engineering works. Meaning, lahat ng ito ay responsibilidad ng civil engineer in charge of that project. So, engineers must develop a fundamental understanding of their professional responsibilities. Other services that are unforeseen initially may be required of the civil engineer during the evolution of the project. So, may mga pagkakataon na during the construction of the project, merong mga unforeseen circumstances, merong mga delayed, merong mga errors. So, kailangan yung in charge na civil engineer ma-handle niya ng maayos, masolusyonan niya agad in the most efficient and effective way. So, the overall health, safety, well-being of the public as well as the total facility cost depends on the overall performance of the project team. Ibig sabihin nito, hindi lang nakasalalay yung success ng project sa civil engineer in charge, kundi sa lahat ng tao na bumubuo ng project team. Civil engineers shall conduct themselves in a highly professional manner and serve as faithful trustees or agents of their client or employers. So kapag merong hindi pagkakaunawaan, misunderstanding, or conflicts between the civil engineer and the employers or the client, the civil engineer should handle it professionally. The client trusted the civil engineer to budget the money for the project. Therefore, the civil engineer should be trustworthy and should not take advantage of the trust given to them by the client. Also, the information, everything about the project should be confidential and should only be between the civil engineer in charge and the client. Care and protection of the environment is paramount in the civil engineer's work engagement. Civil engineers must always strive to maintain the highest standard of ethical professional practice in their dealing with client, employers, employees, competitors, and the community. So, in order for the project to be successful, there should be a mutual trust, effective communication, and understanding between the civil engineer and the client. So that is all for professional responsibility.
Hi, I am Jamel U. Banyares and I will be reporting client-civil engineering relationship. Many engineering works are conceived, designed, and constructed through the efforts of civil engineers employed in governmental agencies or in industry. Other engineering projects came to fruition through the efforts of civil engineering firms engaged for a specific project or program by public agencies or private clients. Many public and private entities of necessity rely on civil engineers as their employees. Independent civil engineering firms are also relied upon to accomplish projects which require special expertise beyond the normal capabilities of the client. More recently, clients have been utilizing new concepts such as program management and design build to implement project. What are the obligations of the civil engineer in the project? The obligations of the civil engineer include 1. The civil engineer shall perform scope of the services as stated in Section 2. So this Section 2 is from the Republic Act number 544 or an act to regulate the practice of civil engineering in the Philippines. By the definition of terms, the practice of civil engineering within the meaning and intent of this act shall embrace the services in the form of consultation, design, preparation of plans, specifications, estimates, erection, installation, and supervision of the construction of streets, bridges, highways, railroads, airports, and hangars, port works, canals, rivers, and shore improvements, lighthouses and dry docks, buildings, fixed structures for irrigation, flood protection, drainage, water supply, and sewage works, demolition of permanent structures and tunnels. The enumeration of any work in this section shall not be construed as excluding any other work requiring civil engineering knowledge and application. So medyo napakadami, but in reality sa projects, hindi naman ito lahat makagawa. Although may mga steps tayo from consultation, design, preparation of plans, to the installation and the finishing. May mga proseso talaga yan na dapat sundin ng civil engineering and their services na included sa contract. Number 2, the civil engineer shall exercise reasonable skill, care, and diligence in the performance of his obligation. Dapat capable siya and masusi siya sa mga proseso ng construction from planning to the construction and the finishing. Number 3, the civil engineer shall act independent and as required by the contract perform with the necessary skills and professional judgment when required to certify, decide, or exercise discretion between the client and a third party with whom the client has a contract. So yun, dapat capable pa din kahit may sabihin natin may hinire yung client na third party or contractor firms, other firms, dapat capable tayo cooperate and to give our skills to have a better environment. For the civil engineer is authorized to act as the client's faithful agent when required, but only as implied in Section 2 or implied in the contract conducted for the project. So yun, dapat kung halimbawa ikaw yung main project engineer, dapat nakasaad yun talaga sa kontrata. In case na hindi, then hindi ka authorized to, you have no jurisdiction of many processes in the construction. Doon ka lang talaga services na nasa kontrata mo. When aware of any matters which will charge or has charged the cost scope of the services, the civil engineer shall give written notice to the client containing particulars to the change. Kapag may major or sabihin natin mga minor changes, dapat aware din yung client mo. Hindi basta-basta na dahil naisipan ni engineer itong gawin, na ilipat yung halimbawa kwarto dito sa left, papunta sa right, civil engineer lang yung masusunod. Dapat may permiso pa rin yun ni client. For specified stage services, the civil engineer shall not initiate or proceed with any subsequent stage of the services without the approval of the client. So number 7, when required, the civil engineer shall direct and cooperate with all other professionals and integrate their work, where applicable, into that being undertaken by the civil engineer and other professionals, but shall not be professionally reliable for their work. So yun, for example, yung civil engineer, pwede siyang may-cooperate sa master plumber, sa master electrician. For example, master electrician, parang yung mababawa sa wall natin is napakalaki. Pwede siyang may-cooperate para ma-maintain pa rin ang integrity ng structure rigidity as designed. Nasa liability na yan ni master electrician kung may hindi siya nagawa or that nagka-problema sa sphere ng field niya. Number 8, the civil engineer may recommend specialized suppliers and or contractors to design and execute certain parts of the works, in which case the civil engineer shall coordinate the design of which part with the overall design of the works, but he shall be relieved of all the responsibility for the design, manufacture, installation, and performance of any such part or parts of the works. The civil engineer shall not be reliable for acts of negligence, default, or omission by such person or persons. Nakasaad naman sa kontrata na kung ito lang services mo, dyan ka lang dapat talaga reliable or liable kapag may problema. Number 9, the civil engineer shall notify the client of any interest the civil engineer has which may significantly conflict with the interest of the client under the contract. Kapag halimbawa may gustong baguhin yung civil engineer based sa kung mas mapapaganda yung integrity ng structure, dapat mananotice si client. The obligation of the client include, the client shall pay the civil engineer for his services, the amount of fees and expenses set out or determined in their agreement. So number 2, the client shall provide the civil engineer within reasonable time that does not result in delay to the provision of the services, all information required by the civil engineer in the performance of his services, and a decision in writing all matters properly referred to the client in the writing. May mga projects talaga, certain projects na kailangan ng malaking period of time para ma-complete, and meron namang small projects lang na madali. And dapat yung scale of deadline for completion is scale dapat doon sa project. And all the documents. The client shall cooperate with the civil engineer and shall not interfere with or obstruct the proper performance of the services. Number 4, the client shall, as soon as practicable, make arrangements to enable the civil engineer to enter the site and inspect facilities needed in the performance of his services. As soon as practicable or mag-work na yung services ni civil engineer, dapat may permission na yung client na pwede siyang mag-survey sa land and any sort na para masimula na yung project. The client shall arrange for the provision of services from other professionals or others as may be required and bear all costs. When the civil engineer is required to administer the work of other professionals or other third parties who are directly contracted by the client, or when the civil engineer is required to act as engineer to the contract for any contract on behalf of the client, then all instructions by the client shall be given to the civil engineers. It is just a matter of branching out. First, kung ikaw yung engineer to the contract, or ikaw yung sabihin nating project engineer, yung any changes, any ideas ni client ay dapat sabihin sa'yo ni client. At ikaw naman yung as engineer to the contract, ikaw naman yung magsasabi sa mga branch out professionals or third parties, for example, kay master plumber, kay master electrician, sa mechanical engineer. Tapos sila na may magsabi sa kanilang mga foreman and yung foreman sa kanilang mga workers. When aware of any matters which will change or has changed the scope of the civil engineer services, the client shall notify in writing within 7 days the civil engineer containing, as fast as it is practicable, the particulars of the change. So 7 days dahil sabihin natin dapat talaga 7 days or sooner para maiwasan yung any delay in the project. Liability of the civil engineers to the client. The civil engineer shall only be liable to pay damages to the client arising out of or in connection with their agreement of if a breach of duty of care is established against the civil engineer. So dapat within that contract lang yung mga services lang dapat na na nasa contract or na offer ni engineer. The client shall only be liable to pay damages to the civil engineer if a breach of the client's duty with the civil engineer established against the client. Resolution of any conflict arising from the agreement between the civil engineer and the client shall be done by giving preference to the process of arbitration. Yun, dapat pag-usapan mo na pag may mga may hinabol si client dong sa civil engineer, dapat pag-usapan mo na between the two of them. Or establishment of the breach of duty on the part of the civil engineer and that of the breach of the client's duty to the civil engineer shall be undertaken by third-party arbitrator, mutually accepted to the client and the civil engineer. So yun, dapat may pag-usap talaga kung may paghabol man sa either side of either party na breach of contract. Dapat pag-usapan muna ng both parties, or mas maganda kung may mutual arbitrator na mag-facilitate. Sila ba yung liable? Hindi yung yung porket may nakitang breach si client, pinatulpo na. Dapat between the two of them muna. Limitations of civil engineer and its responsibility. Number 1, the civil engineer shall have no responsibility or liability for cost, loss, or damage of whatsoever nature arising from any errors or in omission from data, documents, plans, design, or specifications not prepared by the civil engineer or other personnel under the direct control of the civil engineer and arising from any act or omission or lack of performance or any negligent or fraudulent act of omission by the client or any other consultant, contractor, or supplier to the client or any employee or agent of the client, other consultants, contractors, or supplier. Yung liability lang ni civil engineer is yung ginawa talaga niya. For example, yung structural plan or floor plan, doon siya may liability. But any other plans, for example, yung naging plano ni architect na nagka-error, for example, yung ginawa ni architect is lampas doon sa land mo, problema na liable na doon si architect dahil siya yung nag-decide from lot of land. Number 2, notwithstanding any recommendation or lack of recommendation made by the civil engineer to the client, the civil engineer shall not be held to have made warranty or promise as to the suitability, competence, or performance of any other consultant, contractor, supplier, or any third party. Porket hindi nag-recommend si engineer sa mga naging decision ni client is hahabulin na siya ni client. Sabihin na, hindi mo naman sinabi to. Pwede kasi hindi naman nag-promise or hindi naman within that service na agree ng civil engineer. The civil engineer shall not be responsible for the techniques, methods, programs, sequences, or procedures adopted by the contractor or other third-party responsible for executing any aspects of the project, nor for their performance on time, their failure to carry out the work in accordance with any contract documents, or for any other acts of omission. Liability na ni contractor or the third party na service ka lang talaga. In a general idea, magiging liable lang yung civil engineer within the scope of his services. So for damages naman, for example, na nakita na may breach of contract or liability civil engineer, damages shall be payable on the following terms. Damages payable shall be limited to the amount of reasonably foreseeable loss and damage suffered as a direct result of such breach. So yun, yung mga dapat naging negligible lang yung si civil engineer but within halimbawa yung naging damage ng typhoon or yung damages na hindi naman niya sakop is hindi na talaga yan. So number 2, the maximum amount of damages payable in respect of liability, whether under the law or contract or otherwise, is limited to the amount specified in the specific provision, or if no such amount or provision is specified, to the lesser of 300,000 or 10% of the total amount of damages to the portion of the work attributed to the civil engineer's breach of duty, or 25% of the total fees payable under the agreement. If found to be liable in circumstances where the acts of omissions of a third party have contributed to the loss of damage, the proportion of damages payable by the party found liable shall be limited to that portion which is attributed to the party's breach of duty, whether the claims are made under the contract or otherwise. So, yung liable lang ni engineer is yung naging service niya. And, for example, naging liable naman sa part na to, yung third party, dapat yun din yung hapulin ni client. So, for the suspension or termination of services, if circumstances arise for which the civil engineer is not responsible and which make it impractical or impossible for the civil engineer to perform in whole or in part the services in accordance with their agreement, then the civil engineer shall promptly notify the client of the same. For example, nagbagyo, bumagyo, bumaha, lumindol, tapos nagka-damage yung structure, and sinabi ni civil engineer na masyado ng maraming nasira and impossible na or impractical pa para na i-continue yung project. Dapat i-notify niya yung client, hindi yung last na malalaman ni client, impossible na continue yung project. If by reason of the above mentioned circumstances, certain services had been suspended, the time for their completion shall be extended by the extent of the delay plus a reasonable period of their resumption. Or if the speed of performing certain services has to be reduced, the time of their completion shall be extended as is necessary by reason of the circumstance. Kapag halimbawa nag-continue yung project at nagkamera ng delay, dapat reasonable din si client na i-extend yung due date angkop dun sa naging delay plus yung time na kung kailan mag-resume yung construction. So, the client may post or part of the services or terminate the agreement by written notice of not less than 30 days to the civil engineer, who shall immediately make arrangement to stop the services and minimize further expenditure. Pag may termination of contract na, dapat i-notify agad sa civil engineer para hindi na malagdagan pa yung expenditure kasi abala pa din yung sa client. So the civil engineer by written notice has no less than 30 days may terminate the agreement or at his end or her discretion without prejudice to the right of termination suspended the performance of the whole or part of the services under the following condition. When 30 days after the due date payment of any account, the civil engineer has not received payment of that part, or if which has not been by that time been contested in right, kapag hindi binayaran yung sweldo ng civil engineer, pwedeng i-terminate na agad. When services had been suspended for a period exceeding 6 calendar months, or if it is clear to the civil engineer that it will be impossible or impractical to resume the suspended services before the period of suspension has exceeded 6 months. When the services are suspended or terminated, the civil engineer shall be entitled to payment for the services carried out, including consequential costs, expenses, and destruction fees incurred as a result of the suspension or termination, and remobilization fees or resumption. Suspension or termination of the agreement shall not prejudice or affect accrued rights or claims and liabilities of the parties. Pag terminate na ni client client, mayroon tayong tinatawag na termination. Dapat bayaran ni client yung mga weeks na nagtrabaho pa rin si civil engineer and so on and so forth. So the settlement disputes, if a dispute arises on either party, then that party shall be noticed in writing served on other party of the details of the dispute and request that the dispute be resolved by conciliation. If the matter in dispute is not resolved in the conciliation between the parties within the prescribed time, then the matter in dispute shall be referred to arbitration. So yun, dapat pag-usapan muna nilang dalawa from client to the civil engineer kung ano ba yung naging dispute. If not resolved between that time, pwede sila through arbitration na may third party mutual arbitrator na mag-weigh kung sino ba yung may liability or may breach of contract. So the ownership of data, designs, and documents. The design analysis, drawings, specifications, and reproductions thereof are instruments of service owned by the professional engineer and shall be used only for the specific project covered by the agreement between the client and the engineer. So hindi dapat doon lang talaga specific doon sa project, hindi na pwedeng gamitin yung sa ibang project unless may permission ni client.
Good day everyone, my name is Rinalyn Benavides and I am going to report civil engineering services. So we all know that civil engineering is a professional engineering discipline that deals with the design, construction, and the maintenance of the physical and natural built environment. Civil engineer and civil engineering firms, whether they serve public or private employers, can provide a variety of important services, and these typical services offered includes: so number 1 is design, consultation, and advice. As a civil engineer who have enough knowledge on this field, they can provide engineering advice and technical solutions on different projects. So number 2 is feasibility study. This is to establish whether the project is viable. A civil engineer can help employer determine the operating cost for both short-term and long-term, the duration, and the risk of the project. So next is field investigation and engineering data collection. Of course, one of the most important tasks before constructing, for example, a building, is to complete site surveying, and that is one thing that a civil engineer can offer because they are knowledgeable about it. Okay, so number 5 is environmental assessment, impact statement, or engineering report. So those are technical report that an engineer can provide which present a problem and offers a solution. Opinions of estimates, because like what I've said earlier, engineers can give a cost estimate for the upcoming projects. Okay, so next is preliminary and final design, drawing, specification, and construction bidding documents. 7th is assistance in securing construction bid and in awarding contract. So number 8, construction administration and observation. So to oversee the construction phase of a project will provide a higher level of confidence that the objective is met during construction. So number 9 is the arrangement for or performance of testing of materials and equipments. 10. Assistance in startup, assessment of capacity, and operation of facilities. 11. Preparation of operation and maintenance manual. 12. Appraisals and rate studies. 13. Value engineering. expert testimony, assessment of risk, structural remediation and rehabilitation. Another service that a civil engineer can offer is project management and controls, because a civil engineer can keep the entire construction process efficient and on track. Next is provision of supplementary staff, and lastly, teaching, because just like our instructor in our department who chose to share their knowledge to the future engineer. In addition to that, civil engineer can also be construction managers or program managers. So what do a construction manager do? They plan, coordinate, budget, and supervise construction project from start to finish. They may also employ other subconsultants and subcontractors as part of their service. So many civil engineers and civil engineering firms specialize in specific areas of engineering such as structural and foundation, where civil engineer offer structural design and drawings. Second is geotechnical and environmental, where civil engineer provide feasibility and research study for environmental health and safety. Next is water resources, wherein civil engineer is responsible for water supply and treatment. Transportation, where civil engineer provides solutions to traffic due to man-made and natural phenomena through road maintenance and management. And lastly, construction management. It often represents a blend of both discipline between design and management or project execution. So, professional civil engineering firms draw upon the combine of various disciplines such as economists, planners, engineers and designers, estimator, architects, and etc. Civil engineers are employed by these practitioners to assist them in performance of their respective services. So to conclude, civil engineering firms is in the best position to practically shape and reshape the future of engineering. Okay, so in terms of project implementation and approach, project implementation has become increasingly complex, involving financial, regulation, environmental, technical, and managerial matter. As a result, clients have opted to pursue a number of implementation where program manager is generally a civil engineer. The client retains program manager to perform specialized tasks necessary to the development or construction of a specific project. Alternatively, the client may retain a program manager to develop, define, and oversee the program, prepare budgeting, estimate of program costs, prepare time, and provide periodic program status report. However, most case, the client continues to be the construction agent with all of the member of the program. And that is all for the civil engineering services. Thank you.
So now, let's discuss about specialization in civil engineering. Within the practice of civil engineering, the BICE, or the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers, recognizes the initial 5 areas of specialization. A civil engineer who has demonstrated his knowledge, experience, education, and training in accordance with the requirements of the concerned specialty committee of the BICE is awarded the Certificate of Specialization by BICE. Those awarded with the certificates are considered qualified for positions in the respective areas of specialization. The PICE recognizes specialization in the fields of structural engineering, geotechnical engineering, water engineering, transportation engineering, and construction management and engineering. A civil engineer who has a specialization in any area of civil engineering may be considered as a specialist in the appropriate field as enumerated. Have you ever wondered what are the specializations in civil engineering that we might pursue someday? During the beginning of our journey as civil engineering students, we only focused on our bachelor's degree as civil engineer. But as we go further in our profession, we will also encounter what are the expertise we might follow. So now, let's discuss the different specializations of civil engineering. First, we have structural engineering. It is a subdiscipline of civil engineering in which structural engineers are trained to design the bones and muscles that create the form and shape of man-made structures. Structural engineers also must understand and calculate the stability, strength, rigidity, and earthquake susceptibility of built structures for buildings and non-building structures. The structural designs are integrated with those of other designers, such as architects and building services engineer, and often supervise the construction of projects by contractors on site. Next, we have geotechnical engineering. It is a branch of civil engineering concerned with the engineering behavior of earth materials. It uses the principles of soil mechanics and rock mechanics for the solution of its respective engineering problems. It also relies on knowledge of geology, hydrology, geophysics, and other related sciences. Geotechnical or rock engineering is a subdiscipline of geological engineering. In addition to civil engineering, geotechnical engineering also has applications in military, mining, petroleum, coastal engineering, and offshore construction. The fields of geotechnical engineering and engineering geology have knowledge areas that overlap. However, while geotechnical engineering is a specialty of civil engineering, engineering geology is a specialty of geology. They share the same principles of soil mechanics and rock mechanics, but differ in the application. Next, we also have water engineering. It is a subset of civil engineering that focuses on the study of how water reacts in natural systems, such as coasts, estuaries, and rivers, as well as man-made environments. It also entails the development and management of techniques, facilities, and equipment that are designed to preserve and control this natural resource for human use. Some of the key areas that water resource engineers focus on include natural springs, underground wells, and water treatment facilities. Aside from dealing with the management and provision of clean water, water resource engineering involves creating and maintaining systems that dispose of sewage and wastewater. We also have transport engineering. It is the application of technology and scientific principles to the planning, functional design, operation, and management of facilities for any mode of transportation in order to provide for the safe, efficient, rapid, comfortable, convenient, economical, and environmentally compatible movement of people and goods transport. Transportation engineering primarily involves planning, design construction, maintenance, and operation of transportation facilities. The facilities support air, highway, railroad, pipeline, water, and even space transportation. The design aspects of transportation engineering include the sizing of transportation facilities, or how many lanes or how many capacity the facility has. It is also determining the materials and thickness used in pavement designing, the geometry like the vertical and horizontal alignment of the roadway or track. And last but not the least, the construction management and engineering. They design and execute processes for building and maintaining the infrastructure of our world. The tools of the trade for today's successful construction engineer include the following: strong math, science and computer skills, creativity, an aptitude for applying science and engineering methods to solve problems, a love of building structures such as bridges, airports, buildings, stadiums, dams, and highways, an interest in working indoors and outdoors, initiative and a strong work ethic, the ability to collaborate with diverse people, good communication skills, and of course, a desire to learn in a constantly changing environment. So, these are the different specialization of civil engineering.
Under Section 1 of the practice of civil engineering is the selection of a civil engineer. The accomplishment of the client's objectives and commitment of financial resources, soundness of design, and suitability of the proposed project for its intended function rest upon the experience, organization, skill, integrity, and judgment of the civil engineer. It refers to the management of a civil engineer is one of the most important decisions to be made during the development of an entire project, and his or her recommendations based on these factors affect life cycle cost and thereby influence the economic feasibility of the undertaking. So, selecting a civil engineer must be qualified and expert means qualifications and expertise in performing services. The cost of the full range of engineering services typically amounts to not less than 1 to 2% of the life cycle cost of most construction projects. It is therefore in the client's best interest to engage the most qualified and reputable civil engineers or civil engineering firm available. It is usually advantageous for the client to select a civil engineer who can support the project from a conception through design, construction, and project startup. Continuity of service aids in developing a relationship between the civil engineer and the client, which will add to the success of the project. So, it means reputation. The civil engineer's reputation as referred by the previous clients. Qualifications, experience, reputation, and quality of client service are of critical importance in the selection of a civil engineer as a consultant. It means it is based primarily on cost of services with limited consideration on the competence or expertise of the consultant can result in unsatisfactory service to the client and in higher overall project cost. And the civil engineer's competence in specialty fields, performance on other projects of similar nature, interrelationship with the design team members, personnel assignments, provision for independent reviews and costs, insurance and other annual charges, and the resulting life cycle cost of the project. Importantly, the client should recognize that selecting an engineer based on quality and expertise is somewhat subjective. It is imperative that the clients assign those individuals who are best suited within their organizations to make the selection. So, the civil engineer must be punctual, means ability to assign a qualified staff on the site to take charge of the project. Once a civil engineer is selected, detailed discussions between the civil engineer and client to define the scope and expectations of the engineering services to be provided are essential before negotiating to a fee for services. So it is clear defined scope of services greatly reduces the potential for misunderstanding or confusion, which can later evolve into project delays and claims for additional compensation. So, a detailed scope services protects the interest of both the client and the consultants. So, the civil engineer or the civil engineering firm must be financially equipped, having possession of financial and business resources to accomplish the assignment. The Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers supports procedures such as those specified by CIAP Documents 101 and 102, Executive Order 164, and PD 1594 as amended. So, in implying these procedures, the selection, procurement, and administration of engineering services should be the responsibility of the owner or the owner's engineering staff. So, you could be called as a civil engineer if you are responsible and registered. It means that your validity of registration from the PRC means you pass the board exam. So, that would be all.
Prime professional practice. The guidelines in this manual refer specifically to the engagement of engineering services where the consulting civil engineer serves as the client directly as a prime professional, and where the client is usually also the owner of the project. Some information in this manual is also applicable when the civil engineer serves the client indirectly as subconsultant through another engineer or architect who serves as the prime professional. These services may also be performed through another entity on a design, build, construction management, or turnkey project. In other words, this report is about the engagement of civil engineering services. It could be directly or indirectly, directly when the civil engineer serves the client or he himself is the project owner, while indirectly when the civil engineer is working as a subconsultant through another engineer or architect.
Good day everyone, my name is Maria Elisa Andes from BSCE 3A and I will report to you the chapter 1.8 and 1.9 of the practice of civil engineering, which are the employment and design competition. So let's start with the chapter 1.8, which is the employment. Employment is the state of being employed, and it is occupation by which a person earns a living. Employment, the guidelines in this manual also refer to civil engineers employed by professional consulting firms, government agencies, educational institutions, construction firms, manufacturing and commercial entities, and other entities. The role of civil engineers in our society is to plan and design bridges, tunnels, highways, airfields, harbors, water and sewage systems, and also buildings. So, civil engineering is a very broad and varied field in which most civil engineers specialize in only one area. So, this topic also includes the civil engineers employed in different specializations. Professional consulting firms. So some civil engineers pursue to independent consulting work, and some of them work for consulting architectural and engineering firms, in which their advices and knowledge are very important to companies in executing their different projects. Government agencies. Some of the civil engineers work for the government or in municipal level. They work with city governments on the planning and management of the town. It involves designing, maintaining streets, water supply networks, constructing municipal solid waste management, and others. So the common here is in the agency of the Department of Public Works and Highways. Also, some of the civil engineers pursue their career in educational institutions in which they teach college students, especially civil engineering students, to the next generation of professionals. We also have some of the civil engineers who pursue their career in the field of construction firms. Some civil engineers work in construction firms in which they supervise the construction of such projects to ensure that the buildings or infrastructures are built according to carefully drafted plans. So civil engineers that work in construction engineering are responsible for the design and safety structure that are used in the construction. We also have civil engineers who pursue their careers through specializing structural engineering, in which they are trained to analyze and design a structure that will safely bear the stresses, forces, and loads that will make the structure impregnable. Geotechnical engineering. In this field, they study the behavior of the soil under the influence of loading forces and studies rock and soil supporting civil engineering system. So they determines and designs the type of foundations, earthworks, and pavement subgrades that are required for the intended man-made structures to be built. Transportation engineering. In this field, they plan, design, and operate for any mode of transportation in order for them to provide safe, rapid, and convenient as well as economic way of transportation to the public. Water resource engineering. In this field, they plan and responsible for the construction of hydraulic structures in which help to manage human water resources. Environmental engineering. Those engineers who specialize in environmental engineering are responsible for environment-friendly designs, purification of water and air, and also remediation of contaminated sites after waste disposal or accidental contamination. Surveying. It is defined as the science and technique of determining the terrestrial positions of points and the distances and angles created between them. So this is done to locate and measure property lines, layout buildings, bridges, channels, and highways. Coastal engineering. Those civil engineers who specialize coastal engineering are concerned with the coastal and marine structures. Coastal engineering is used in coastal protection, which is the main defense against flooding and erosion. In summary, this topic includes civil engineers who are employed in different areas of specializations like education, manufacturing, construction firms, and others. The job of the civil engineers plays a vital role in providing safety and welfare to the public and in the environment. So scientists investigate phenomena, whereas civil engineers create solutions to problems, and improve upon existing solutions. So this is the chapter 1.9, which is the design competition under the practice of civil engineering. Design competition is a process through which a civil engineer is selected above other competitors based on proposal or an innovative approach to solving a client's needs. Competing firms are normally shortlisted from a number of engineers responding to a client solicitation either directly by a letter request or indirectly through a newspaper or other form of publication. The civil engineer should be awarded a stipend to participate in the competition. Design competitions are also popular for civil engineering students to introduce them to the real-world engineering situations. This will teach them about project management and fabrication techniques used in industry. Some examples are miniature of bridges and towers that are tested and judged. That's all for my report, and I am Maia Elisa Andes from BSCE 3A, and thank you for listening.
In this topic, we also have contingency basis of employment. If you say contingency in civil engineering, it is the amount of money set aside to cover any unexpected expenses, and also it is the amount given to the civil engineer as his professional fee in performing his duty and responsibility. Based on Canon 5C or the PICE Code of Ethics, provides that engineers may request, propose, or accept professional commissions on a contingency basis, only under circumstances in which their professional judgments would not be compromised. Although contingent commissions are permissible, it is the general view of PICE that it is not in the best interest of the client or the public for the civil engineer to provide professional services on a contingency basis. It is also said in one of our fundamental canon on our Code of Ethics that civil engineers shall build their professional reputation on the merit of their services, and shall not compete unfairly with others. So, as civil engineers, we have to work very well and to love our profession not just because it is our way of living, but to earn the trust and reputation from those people who we are working with.
Professional practice of foreign civil engineers. Foreign civil engineers are allowed by law RA 8981 to practice civil engineering in the Philippines under the following instances. First, the law of the foreigner state or country allowed the citizens of the Philippines to practice civil engineering on the same basis and grant the same privileges as those enjoyed by the subjects or citizens of such foreign state or country. Second, allowed under international agreement. Third, consultants to be engaged in foreign-funded, joint venture, or foreign-assisted projects of the government. Fourth, employees of Philippine or foreign private institutions pursuant to law. Fifth, civil engineers who were former citizens of the Philippines who had been registered and issued a certificate of registration and a professional identification card prior to their naturalization as foreign citizens and who, while in the country on a visit, sojourn, or permanent residence, desire to practice their profession. The application of the law is, however, not automatic. Foreign civil engineers must still secure a certificate of registration or license or special permit from the Professional Regulation Commission, agencies, organizations, or individuals, whether public or private, who secure the services of a foreign civil engineer are made responsible by law, RA 8981 for securing a special permit from the PRC and the Department of Labor and Employment pursuant to the respective rules. Thank you.